I'm seeing them everywhere, ladies and gentlemen. Mafia YouTubers claiming to be reformed and selling their stories to encourage others to steer away from a life of crime.
Stop the baloney, okay? You don't want to go there either.
Don't get me wrong, the content is amazing. One comment on a Mafia subreddit post couldn't have hammered the nail on the coffin more precisely when it comes to these motivational speakers. Nobody really knows. Let's be honest. Here we are relying on the words of professional liars, and also very secretive people. I don't believe half of his claims, but then I don't believe half the other people's claims, LOL. The man this person is referring to is Ori Spado, better known as the Hollywood mob boss. At least that's what he calls himself. If you don't believe me, just read his About Me section on his website. He became known as a Hollywood fixer doing favors for A-list celebrities and others. Now, while many of his so-called peers consider him a nobody, Ori Spado has thrown himself into the wonderful world of Mafia YouTubers, using his street cred to not only help others, but you guessed it, sell some gangster-ass stories. If you're like me, you probably called bullshit on the man when he started listing off Michael Francis's crimes.
I got a piece of paper here. I got a fucking list of shit about him that I know.
I mean, if you're also like me, you just had your doubts about Ori's stories, period. If you're like the Scotch, welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Grab a glass of water for Ori Spado, and welcome to the many claims of Orlando Spado. If you're like me, you were surprised when Vlad interviewed the stunt double for E.T. I was taken aback, really. He had these stories that almost reminded me like a sort of Anthony Raimondi character. But seriously, who was this man that popped out of nowhere when these Mafia interviews were popping on YouTube? His stories and being involved with La Cosa Nostra families almost sounded like embellished nonsense that people in the comments under Vlad's interview also noticed. This guy is a good storyteller. Sounds like he's really making it up as he goes. This guy is very interesting, but he's also good for helping me fall asleep at night. So, who is this Ori Spado fella? Well, Orlando Spado doesn't even have a Wikipedia page. Fuck. I really gotta dig deep with this one. Alright, on with it. Well, the man who calls himself the Hollywood mob boss graced our earth on December 17th, 1944, in Rome, New York. At the age of 18, Ori joined the US forces and served his country proudly and was discharged honorably in 1966. After serving his country, Spado sold insurance and would open up his own insurance agency, to which things seemed to be going very well. Sometime in the late 70s, he became a distributor for polyglycol, which was a privately held chemical company based out of Boca Raton, Florida, where they later filed for protection from its creditors under Chapter 11 of the Federal Bankruptcy Code. While this part of Ori's story isn't too important, it's interesting to note that the company would be the subject of several lawsuits, charging that the product caused harm to cars to which its product had been applied with. The company was also involved in a trademark infringement suit. Now, I know no one gives a shit about insurance, so I'll get to the juicy juice, to when he really became an accidental mobster. It seems that Ori would be introduced to the underground world by his lawyer Frank Russo, after having his insurance office above Russo's firm. Ori claims to have met big-time mobsters like Frank Costello, down to taking dinner to Russell Bufalino while he was in jail, if I'm saying Bufalino the correct way. For those who don't know, Bufalino was played by Joe Pesci in The Irishman. But Mr. Spado, what do you have to say about the death of Jimmy Hoffa?
No, that was done by Provenzano.
It seems as if Spado is 100% certain of the person behind Jimmy Hoffa's whacking. Now, it is for certain that no one knows who had whacked Jimmy, but I am sure Ori wishes he had whacked Jimmy off himself, at least for the street cred. But if Ori was running an insurance agency in the late 70s and 80s, hanging out with mob bosses almost seems like BS to me, especially claiming to know who whacked off Hoffa, even though an informant named Ralph Picardo, an imprisoned racketeer, told agents that trusted associates of Provenzano had abducted and killed Hoffa. One of Provenzano's henchmen confided details of the crime when he visited Picardo in prison. Prison records showed the Provenzano associate had indeed visited Picardo. We can assume that Ori knows this information not by being in the know, but by actually reading about the information in the papers. Right, Ori?
I got a piece of paper here. I got a fucking list of shit about him.
Now, we all know who Sonny Francis is, especially after the birth of Michael Francis's channel, where he talks about his father and La Cosa Nostra. Now, Sonny was the underboss of the Colombo crime family, where Ori claims to have been very good friends with him. According to Ori, he met Mr. Francis along with Spado's business associate Walter Fifeson. In a blog that was linked to a Reddit post by Joe Puzzles, Ori claims the meeting's purpose was to get to the bottom of death threats that were being made to Walter Fifeson, the founder of Polyglycoat Corporation, where Spado was involved as a distributor. Spado claims that the meeting had been set up through a casting agent named Lou Perry, but had been originally suggested by lawyer Frank Russo. Around 2 weeks after the meeting, Spado was contacted by Frank Russo, who said that Francis had solved the Fifeson issue and needed to meet with Ori. In attendance were Ori Spado, Frank Russo, Walter Fifeson, his unnamed brother-in-law, Lou Perry, along with Sonny and Michael Francis. It came out that Fifeson's brother-in-law was also an in-law of sorts to Michael Francis, the pair having entered a business partnership in which they sold an off-brand paint sealant with stolen and falsified warranties that were linked back to Polyglycoat Corporation. Fifeson found out about the scam at some point and had threatened to revoke his brother-in-law's distributorship, which then resulted in Michael Francis issuing death threats, all according to Ori Spado. Ori seems good at name-dropping, heavy-hitting mobsters in the criminal world, and according to Ori, he had a great friendship with Sonny Francis, to which Michael Francis quickly refutes the allegation of knowing his father.
Anyway, listen, I'm gonna tell you about Ori. I met Ori one time. I don't like Ori. I'm gonna tell you a story about Ori. Jack Gilardi, who was a big agent for ICM, but he calls me up one day and he says to me, Mike, there's some guy by the name of Ori Spado is up here and he's kind of threatening me and he's using your name and your father's name. I said, let me tell you what to do. The next time he comes into your office, Jack, pick up a chair and hit him over the head and throw him the heck out. He's a nobody. He doesn't belong with anybody here. Get him out.
So who do we believe? The man who sounds like he eats cigarettes for breakfast, or the man whose father we're talking about? Here's the thing. It's hard for me to disprove of Ori just because Francis claims he's a nobody, which in a sense is true since Ori never became a made guy. But there is clear evidence that Spado was associated with the Colombo family and the Los Angeles family, though his association was negatively portrayed by other mobsters. Let's get one thing straight here, folks. I'm not discrediting his stories, just presenting the very little facts I could find about the man, since he rarely gives any dates to his stories that would help coincide with factual events. Ori would eventually meet Jimmy Cassie, who was a career criminal and was associated with several mob heavyweights across both coasts. Spado took his hustles down to the wonderful world of Hollywood, where the story gets even more interesting as Ori would later be arrested for being associated with the Colombo crime family, but we'll get to that in a bit. He claimed to have had an attempt on his life, was offered to be made in 2 families, but declined because he wanted to be a lone wolf, and would start to be questioned by fellow Los Angeles crime figures. Kenny Gallo, who was a convicted narcotics dealer and an associate of the Los Angeles crime family, who also later became an informant, wrote in one of his blogs written in 2010, Sonny seems to have had really poor judgment in his later years. Ori Spado was an FBI informant and nobody can dispute that statement. Sonny told people he was not. Ori used to run around LA with papers showing people that John was a rat. Meanwhile, I used to hand out tapes of Ori speaking to the FBI.
Yeah, it's 1 o'clock on Saturday, July the 6th. This is a conversation that I'm going to be having with Scott Garriola, FBI agent based here in Los Angeles.
Kenny Gallo also describes a situation in which Jimmy Cassie was arrested allegedly due to Ori Spado's informing. Jimmy would get picked up by the LAPD because he was around with an FBI informant named Ori Spado in Beverly Hills. Ori had gone out on a collection in the valley and Jimmy was in his car. Ori went into this business and he started running his mouth selling wolf tickets. The guy had enough of Ori's crap and he decked Ori with a tape dispenser. Ori was on the ground and the guy had a pistol out when Jimmy came into the office and stopped the guy. The guy knew Jimmy from the track, so he chilled and he explained his situation. Jimmy helped Ori to the car where he dressed Ori down for acting so foolish. Ori never told Jimmy what he was doing there, or Jimmy would have not even gone with him. A week later, I went to dinner with Jimmy and Ori at Frankie's. After dinner, Jimmy went to Ori's apartment. While there, Ori had to get something from his car. The next thing Jimmy knew, there was a knock at Ori's door. Ori ran to open it, and it was the LAPD OC squad. Ori lived in a secured building. Now, part of the reason I find these Kenny Gallo stories truthful is because the guy has no shame in calling himself an informant. Whereas if you ask Ori Spado about if he ever snitched, we're met with this answer.
And one thing that I learned from Sonny Francis was never call anybody a rat unless you see them on a witness stand testifying. Michael's been there on Norby Walters. There is not one soul on this earth that is responsible for ever being arrested, investigated, or put in jail because of Ori Spado.
Spado spent just over 5 years in a federal prison after being found guilty on a Colombo family indictment in 2008, after being charged with distribution of cocaine and a home evasion conviction on a crime that took place in Burbank, California, that Spado says never happened. He also says that the cocaine distribution conviction was also a setup. Still, he says he never became an informant for the FBI and was never a rat no matter how hard the FBI tried. He was released from prison in 2013. And we all know what happened after that. He wrote a book called The Accidental Gangster that apparently is being made into a film and also appears on various podcasts. I'll leave you with Joe Puzzle's summary about the validity of Ori Spado's claims, because it's exactly how I feel about the man. In summary, Orlando Ori Spado was an associate of both the Los Angeles and Colombo La Cosa Nostra families, and had relationships with mob heavyweights Sonny Francis and Jimmy Cassie. When facing legal difficulty in the late 1990s, he began secretly informing against members of the LA family and was then chased out of its circles. It is unlikely that anybody ever considered him the mob boss of Hollywood, but he was certainly a criminal, involved in fraud, attempted extortion, fencing, home invasions, and narcotics trafficking. While Ori may dismiss his informant status, it is clear that he cooperated against the LA mob and also exaggerates his importance within its structure, as well as the extent of his connections and relationships with its members. However, it should be emphasized that Ori Spado was once, at least to a minor degree, very much an active mobster, and an outright dismissal of him as nothing more than a civilian character is selling him short.